Good evening. Welcome to the San Marino Unified School District Board of Education special meeting. It is August 9th, 2021, and it is 6:35 p.m. Here is Board President Shelley Ryan.
Thank you, Dr. Choi. Good evening. We are in person at San Marino Unified School District Boardroom at 1665 West Drive in San Marino. You can join us virtually via Zoom at www.smusd.us/media. All meetings of the Board of Education are open to members of the public unless publicly noticed as a confidential closed session as allowed by the law, Education Code Section 35147. Members of the public may address the board as outlined in the public comment section of the agenda. The audio of all meetings is recorded, and a member of the public may be held liable for any slanderous or otherwise defamatory statements. In consideration of the board and members of the audience, we have a full crowd here tonight. Please turn off or silence your cell phones while in the boardroom. The San Marino Unified School District encourages those with disabilities to participate fully in the public meeting process. If you need a disability-related modification or accommodation, including auxiliary aids or services to participate in the public meeting, contact the assistant to the superintendent at jdelatore@smusd.us or at 626-299-7000 extension 1310. At least 48 hours before the scheduled board meeting so that we may make every reasonable effort to accommodate you under Government Code Section 54953.2 and the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, 20242, USC Section 12132. Documents provided to a majority of the Board of Education regarding an open session item on this agenda will be made available for public inspection in the district office located here at 1665 West Drive, San Marino during normal business hours. In addition, such writings and documents may be viewed on the district's website at www.smusd.us. We will now open the session. I will call you to order and ask you to raise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please place your hand over your heart. Let's begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. Item 4 is approval of the agenda. This is an action item. May I call on my board members?
I move to approve for tonight's agenda.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Chang. Thank you, Mrs. Chong. I would like to take roll call. Mr. Kalaki?
Aye.
Mr. Chang?
Aye.
Mrs. Chong?
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan? Aye. And the motion has passed. Public comments. The Board of Education has adopted Board Policy 9323B. This will ensure the public's right to be heard in any matters pertaining to the San Marino Unified School District. Persons who wish to provide public comment will have 3 options to submit public comments. First, you may submit through an online form, request to speak during the meeting via question and answer, and phone dial-in. Request to speak during the meeting in person via the public comment card. You may also submit through an online form. Today, between 11 o'clock to 3:30 p.m., we received 2 such emails, and the board was provided with these emails. You may also request to speak during the meeting via question and answer and phone dial-in. During the public comment, the meeting will pause for 1 minute to take requests to speak. Raise your hand function is used to take requests during the public comment period. For online attendees, press the raise hand icon to add yourself to the queue. For phone attendees, dial *9. The speaking order will be determined based on the order of requests received. Individual speakers will be unmuted and called to speak. You may also request to speak during the meeting in person via the public comment card. Please complete the public comment card, submit the completed card to the designated box to your left, to the assistant to the superintendent, no later than when the agenda section is called by the board president. Opportunities for public comment are offered at the start of the open session for matters that are on the agenda. The Board of Education reserves the right to add a public comment period prior to any individual item on the agenda. 5 minutes may be allotted to each speaker, a maximum of 20 minutes to each subject matter. However, in the event there are more than 4 speakers on the same subject matter, the board president retains the discretion to adjust and limit the time allocated to each speaker to ensure that all wishing to speak will be heard within the 20-minute allotment. 5A, communications from the audience concerning matters that are on the agenda may be heard at this time, but not responded to by the Board of Education.
Thank you, President Ryan. We are pausing for 1 minute to take requests to speak regarding matters on the agenda. If you would like to make a request to speak, please press the raise hand icon, dial *9, or submit a public comment card. There are 30 seconds remaining. If you would like to make a request to speak regarding matters on the agenda, please press the raise hand icon, dial *9, or submit a public comment card. President Ryan, we have one request via Zoom, and I understand we have public comment cards as well.
Yes.
Okay.
So we will begin with the speaker on Zoom first.
Okay. Our speaker on Zoom is Chris Ting. Chris, your line is now open.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Wonderful. Hello, Board of Education. Really thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak. My name is Chris Ting. My wife's name is Heidi Shre. We are parents of an incoming 4th grader and a 2nd grader at Valentine Elementary. And really, this is more of a statement related to upcoming safety measures for our students returning to school. So just wanted to further emphasize the importance of continuing to uphold the highest safety measures for our youngest students at SMUSD who are not yet vaccinated. I think we need to remember that even though teachers, staff, parents, siblings that are 12 to 17 may be vaccinated, they are still carriers. In a recent CDC report, the CDC director stated that vaccinated people infected with the Delta variant can transmit the virus. In some states, they found that 3/4 of cases have occurred in fully vaccinated people, which I think we can all agree is incredibly concerning, especially when we think about our young students where vaccination simply isn't an option yet. ABC News is just one of several news outlets reporting that there is a surge in COVID prevalence and hospitalizations among young children. While I'm very happy to see that our COVID case rate here in San Marino is relatively low, there were nearly 94,000 new child COVID-19 cases reported last week nationally. The Delta cases are considered more contagious and more severe for younger children, which can result in respiratory failure and requiring mechanical ventilation. So what does this mean for us here at SMUSD? I think it goes without saying that we need to be more proactive rather than reactive. I'm incredibly fearful to see in the SMUSD protocol matrix that many safety measures that should be required are only being listed as recommended? Why are we not taking the same exact levels of precaution and safety that we've diligently and successfully, I might add, enforced during our last school year? I'm talking about requiring masking not only indoors, but also outdoors, requiring proper distancing within the classroom, and having windows and doors open whenever reasonably possible for proper ventilation, requiring self-screening every morning. There's no question that COVID testing is a much more reliable tool for screening, but I guarantee you that by requiring students and parents to self-screen, it holds people more accountable. It makes people think twice about coming to school when not feeling well. Requiring temperature checks before entering campus every morning, requiring families to quarantine for at least 10 days if they have traveled out of state or have been in close contact with someone who has tested positive. This all goes back to requiring self-screening every morning and making everyone really think about whether it's safe and reasonable to drop their kids off at school that morning. I have the utmost confidence in our Board of Education to institute the right protective measures to keep our youngest students safe. I ask that we really think about how to, again, be proactive rather than wait for our state and county to make obvious preventative measures required. It's really unfortunate, but the fact of the matter is that cases are rising once again, and our children are more at risk than ever. So let's go above and beyond what's required and ensure our kids are happy and healthy and have no reason to have fear while learning at SMUSD. I appreciate all of your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we have a speaker who filled out the card. This is Carol Huang from 1400 Old Mill Road. Come on up.
Thank you. Good evening, board members, superintendent, SMUSD staff, teachers, and families on Zoom. My name is Carol Huang, and I am entering my 8th year as an SMUSD parent. I am so thankful for the work that everyone has done to make sure our students and school populations can reopen with safety as priority during the pandemic. We have kept our own Valentine Viking home for a year and a half of distant learning, and we look forward to this week since summer began. However, we are facing new variants. I think Chris spoke eloquently of all the statistics. This has forced us to reconsider and carefully look for the best possible protection we can give to our child. As parents, this week, we are all doing a risk calculation. We're seeing whether it is safe for our children to return as pediatric hospitalizations are on the rise. Our children under 12 are not vaccinated. They have zero protection against this virus. And so collectively, we have come together to ask for necessary and proven effective safety measures. I've sent an email with a list of signatures. I think we're at 83 tonight. Some parents have multiple children in our schools, and most of the parents are listed as one family member. So you can imagine how many children we're talking about right now. Protections we are asking for are universal masking of everyone on campus, that testing be required weekly, and screening be required daily. Across the world, public health officials agree this list constitutes the multi-layered protection coupled with vaccinations of what our children need to return to school, but also for the schools to remain open. These are the policies that we see other school districts under the same Los Angeles Public Health Department have set up for a safe reopening. And we hope that SMUSD can do the same. And I'd like to close with this thought. I don't want to mask my child. I want to be able to walk into my child's school without a mask and see children smiles and playing and learning and laughing. I don't want this, but I know from all the science that we have to do everything that we can. So I'm here tonight asking you to mask my child. It is her only protection. It is the right thing to do right now during this pandemic. And we know that with the efforts of SMUSD, families, and community, we can give our children a great return to school and continue to work together for a successful and safe school year. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. Okay. All right. 6, 2021-22 COVID-19 protocols, Dr. Lena Richter, Dr. Stephen Choi. This is a discussion item, right?
Yes.
Just
Thank
an
you.
information item.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, President Ryan, members of the board and executive team. Tonight, we are presenting to you a draft for a first read of Board Policy 6158 for independent study. Local educational agencies must adopt updated board policy pursuant to AB 130, which requires all school districts for the 21-22 school year to offer an independent study program option for students whose health would be put at risk with in-person instruction and to meet the educational needs of students. Pursuant to AB 130, all local educational agencies must adopt and update board policy prior to the start of the school year in order to receive apportionment. As such, tonight we are presenting the board with a first read at the special board meeting, and we'll bring this item back to tomorrow's board meeting for a second read and approval by the board. The first draft of Board Policy 6158 has been shared with the board for review, along with the current independent board policy, which is posted on the district website. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have on this new updated policy. Should the board request a read-through of the draft policy as presented, I am happy to provide one, or I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have on this updated policy. And the policy is reflected on both screens.
I will begin with my fellow board members. Anyone with any questions or comments?
That's the one. The new one is under. The new one's under.
Are you referring to a document, Jane?
Oh, yes, the document.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Okay, sorry. It's
It's
okay.
confusing.
I know,
Mrs.
this is,
Chow?
no, I was confused by the two different copies. I didn't realize.
Okay.
Um,
So, Dr. Richter, I just want to thank you because the turnaround time for you getting this policy up, researching it, looking at multiple factors that would be at play here, and the speed in which you did it is wonderful, so that this is an option for our students, and this will ensure that we provide opportunities for our students to engage and to look at instruction. I'm wondering if you have a number for our independent study program right now as it exists from what the parents are saying in our interest survey?
Absolutely, President Ryan. So our interest or request survey closed on Friday, August 6th. Since then, I've received a few more requests via email. We've had professional development all day today, so I haven't gotten to all of them. So we will be adding a few more students to this list. But as of Friday, we have a total district-wide, we have a total of 72 students. At the elementary level, we have 42. This is as of August 6th, Friday. We have 42, and at the secondary level, we have 30.
Okay. I'm just wondering, because we had Carol here speak on masking and the various protocols that we had previously. I'm wondering if we had asked the question about independent study, if we had all of these other protocols, if we had kept them in play, would that change the number and have decreased the number of independent study students? I'm just wondering, was that in the survey? Like if this was if we were masking, if we were doing the temperature checks, were any of those the factors of why somebody?
Those were not,
Elected.
excuse me,
Mhm.
those questions were not, or statements were not included in the request survey.
Okay.
But I have had the pleasure of speaking with numerous parents who have called in last week and well, actually all last week and up till Friday, and they had very good questions to ask. And I spent a lot of time speaking with them. They just wanted to be reassured that the protocols were in place. We
Mhm.
did have some students who withdrew or parents who withdrew their request for independent study. And those are reflected in our documentation. But parents did have very good questions, and thanks to Dr. Choi's document, I was able to provide as much information as I could. And if not, I would consult with Dr. Choi and then get back to the parent.
Okay.
I have a few questions. Mrs. Ryan asked about the interest survey as opposed to this was the actual request. How did the interest survey numbers compare to the actual requests?
The interest survey initially, that was sent out quite a bit before the request survey. Our numbers were significantly higher in that interest survey. And so when we sent out the request survey, we did see that our numbers were much lower.
And was that consistent across both elementary and secondary?
I believe so, yes, I believe so.
So I guess that raises the question, if we had the deadline of Friday and can parents still opt in at some point there has to be like a hard stop, or does there not have to be a hard stop? How does that work in terms of, I know we have built into this exiting and off ramping. What if any on ramping is there?
We did set a deadline of August 6th for the request survey, only because it gives us a very short turnaround time to make sure that we have our teachers in place if we needed to hire additional teachers, and make sure that our teachers had the time to plan and communicate with parents, communicate with the students, make sure our programs were set up in Apex, which would be the secondary curriculum. So we did set Friday as the deadline. Since then, we've had numerous parents email me and actually call me, which was great. And we will be allowing those parents who have called in and emailed to allow to participate in independent study. It does push us back a little bit, and we had the discussion today what that may look like, because at some point we're going to have to set kind of the precedence is if you request, how many days later will it take to get the teacher prepared, to get the student enrolled, to get the student enrolled in Apex if it's a secondary student. But we are going to allow parents who have requested independent study these last couple of days to enroll in the program.
And just to be clear, independent study, number one, is not what we did last year. It's
That is
not
correct.
online, hybrid, or anything like that. So it's a completely different program. And it's a comprehensive school program, right? It's not as though you're able to just like go in and get some packets from your teacher and then do the work that you would normally be doing in class. So there really isn't an opportunity to kind of float in and out of it. Is that correct?
Correct. Throughout my conversations with parents as they've called in or through emails, I wanted to make sure that I communicated what the program looks like with independent study, because many parents had asked, does it look like last year? And I said, no, it does not. It hence the word independent study. It truly is an independent study program where students will be working independently. All elementary students will be learning using their current curriculum, the curriculum that they're using at Carver and Valentine. And for secondary, they'll be using the Apex curriculum, which aligns, it's WASP accredited, aligns through A through G requirements. It offers honors and AP, excuse me.
How does that look in terms of if a student does eventually off ramp and enter the classroom? Is there fairly consistent alignment between where they've been at, or is that sort of an adjustment that somebody would have to make and anticipate?
Yeah, and that's an excellent question. It is reflected on our FAQs, and we are receiving guidance quite frequently, and it seems to change sometimes. So I want to make sure that the FAQs posted on our websites are constantly updated, so it is a live document. Students who have been enrolled 15 days or more in independent study do have the option of returning to in-person instruction at any time throughout the school year. However, we are recommending that if they're enrolled in independent study, to think about doing it at the end of the trimester, at the end of the semester, because the pace at which the students are learning in person and in independent study may vary, since independent study is really self-paced. And we don't want students who then enter into in-person instruction to be that much further ahead or that much further behind what's happening in the classroom.
And then have the secondary students been counseled as to its implications regarding college? Or, I mean, it's also new. I'm not sure that there is any real guidance at this point.
Yes, it's very new, and we have not received guidance on any type of counseling for college information yet, but that should be forthcoming, and that will definitely be communicated to the high school so that the counselors are aware of that information and can share, and the high school administration to share with their students and their staff.
And then just to be, I know that I asked this question to you earlier, but just to be clear, this is pretty consistent with what has been recommended by California School Board Association as the policy to adopt. Right?
Correct.
Sorry, I don't want to take up all the questions if other people have questions.
Okay, I have a couple questions. From the for the independent study, for the VP 6158, that they mentioned about the reason they choose independent study, whose health or other personal circumstances make a classroom attendance difficult. So I believe that this under COVID-19 matter. So then, you know, the California government education, they come out this, right? So in the future, if COVID-19 is gone, either they still keep this program or they may cancel.
That's a great question.
This is
Thank you
my
for
first
asking.
question. And then the second question, if they right now have a 72 students registered on this program, so is there a time frame if they think stay in the independent study even more difficult than in person, they want to change? Is there any time they can get out or?
Students who have been, so I'll answer the second question first,
Yeah.
Mr. Chang. Students who have been enrolled in independent study for 15 days or more may exit the program at any time during the school year and return to in-person instruction. We are hoping that we don't see that frequently because we know it is disruptive to students' learning, the pacing of what students are learning. And we want to make sure that when they do return back to in-person instruction, they're in alignment with the pacing of the instruction that's happening in the classroom. With regards to your first question, the intent of AB 130 recently passed in mid-July was for those students whose health would be put at risk with in-person instruction to provide them an alternative program so that they can continue to learn. And so that determination can be made by the parent if the student's health would be put at risk. So this provides an alternative educational program for students who are unable to return to the classroom.
Okay, and then the next question, I think it is a family and the student right to choose the independent study, but once they choose the independent study for the college admission, I think they need to have enough requirement and even more than the requirement subject so they can compete with other school student. So do you think independent study student maybe not may not have an advantage to compete in the college admission?
Well, we are moving into the 21-22 school year completely prepared for 100% in-person instruction with all the safety protocols in place, in some cases above and beyond. However, for those students who are unable to return for in-person instruction, this provides them the opportunity. And since they are learning the current curriculum in elementary, they should be fine. And I know that elementary is really young to start thinking about
Right.
college. But for secondary, we're confident that with Apex is A through G aligned or compliant, and it does meet all the requirements for, it is WASC accredited. So they will be able to enroll in the same types of courses that are required for graduation and complete graduation requirements if they're, let's say a junior or a senior. So the curriculum that they will be using in high school will provide them the opportunity to enroll in those courses that they need for graduation.
Okay.
With regard to parents, although I understand the preference as far as lining up the two types of study, that we either try to do it at a semester or trimester or some natural break in the curriculum, but the law does require that parents, if for whatever reason they felt it was appropriate, they could go from independent study to on campus and from on campus back to independent study if they felt that they needed to. Is that correct?
That is how I understand the law. Yes,
And is that how, being consistent with the law, that's what we're planning on doing here, correct?
correct.
Okay. With going back to who qualifies, I guess, for independent study. I did look back at the communication that we had sent out, which I believe had the town hall, the LA County LACO town hall, and the county superintendent. It was an interesting comment that she had made in describing the independent study. She said the independent study is a change in the legislation that requires all districts to offer independent study if a family feels they are not ready to send their child to in-person instruction. We're taking that same position, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So it's not that a parent needs to provide a doctor's note or provide some sort of specific medical diagnosis. It's just simply whether a parent feels that their child's health would be put at risk by being on campus, even during a COVID pandemic.
That is correct.
Okay.
In fact, the first rendition of the update to AB 30 said as determined by the parent.
Thanks. Also, with regard to the daily or the weekly in-person instruction that the child at any level receives with their teacher or their teacher of record. One of the concerns I have is I understand that we must provide daily instruction, for example, at the lower grades, daily. What qualifies as daily? Does 30 minutes a day qualify as daily, or is it 6 hours a day? What do we have an explanation of what that is?
There is no minimum requirement or maximum requirement for the number of daily synchronous instruction. Some of the sample schedules that we have posted on our FAQs do show what it would look like at TK, and those are from the Los Angeles County Office of Education. Show what it would look like for the TK through grade span, TK3 grade span, 4 through 8, and 9 through 12 as well. For TK3, the minimum requirement is daily live instruction. That could range anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours a day, depending on what subjects they're teaching, what thematic unit they're teaching, or what subject area they're teaching. If they're grouping students together for projects or learning groups, it could look very different weeks. It could look very different on different days. For grades 4 through 8, they must engage in daily live interaction, which could be daily check-ins, it could be small group sessions, it could be wellness checks, a variety of those, and at minimum, weekly synchronous instruction. And for grades 9 through 12, it would be minimum synchronous instruction on a weekly basis. So it truly is an independent study program. It does not mirror what we had last year with distance learning.
But do we have a specific number of minute minimums that we're going to require for the implementation of our independent study program rather than just once a day or once a week?
There is not a minimum requirement for synchronous instruction. There is a requirement similar to SB 98 during distance learning, which is for TK and K, it's 180 minutes per day, but that is a combination of synchronous and asynchronous instruction, which would be synchronous and independent work, basically. And for grades 3 through, forgive me, I can't remember the grade levels at this point. It was, no, excuse me, 1 through 3rd, first through 3rd, it was 230 minutes, and then 4th through 12th was 240 minutes per day, with, again, a combination of synchronous and asynchronous instruction.
So I appreciate that. I appreciate the desire of parents who are participating in this to make sure that they receive the benefits of the level of safety for their children that they want and they need and deserve. I want to also make sure, obviously, I mean, I'm sure we all do, that the level of education that independent study students are receiving is at the same high level, high quality education that every other student in the district is receiving. And we're confident that that's our plan and that's what's going to happen. Correct?
Absolutely. And that language is reflected in our our draft board policy.
And with regard to the secondary school students, particularly the high school students, the independent study will provide opportunity for AP classes and honors classes.
That is correct.
Okay, so those students can graduate and could very well graduate, not set themselves behind with regard to any AP opportunities.
Correct.
Are there additional AP offerings through the independent study program that are not offered on our campus?
There may be, and so when a student selects an AP class, whether it's at the high school, and then wants to participate in independent study, if that AP class is not offered in independent study, the counselors will be working to find another course that's aligned to the same rigor or the same level of rigor of that AP course, so that they're not missing out on the AP course that they would have initially selected.
Okay, and so if a student who is on campus sees that there is an AP course offering in the independent study that is not offered on campus, can an on-campus student take advantage of an independent study AP course if it's not offered on campus? Can they do 5 periods of on campus, but because an AP class is only offered through independent study, if it is, they can take that AP class and get that credit through an independent study?
So that language is not written into this board policy, but I do know with existing independent study that we've had traditionally in the past, students had opportunity to participate in independent study. So that may be an option, but I'm not 100% certain.
Okay, because I mean, obviously the goal is to try to break down all barriers, open all doors as
Correct.
much as we can to as many educational opportunities as possible. And if we've already got confidence in the Apex program, because that's our independent study, and it's being offered to some of the students at the school, then if they would otherwise qualify, they could be part of that class as well. It may be something that we can look into as an option potentially. There may be other issues that come up, you know, but it was just a thought that I had.
Sure.
With regard to, there were some questions earlier with regard to college admissions and the impact on applications. Is the district or the high school required to identify independent study as an independent study class on a transcript? Or if it's at the same level of education, is it permissible, if you know, to have an independent study program show up without that independent study indication?
To my understanding and speaking with our data analyst and the high school administration, the independent study would not be reflected on the transcript. It would be the courses and the course codes and the grade that would be reflected, but it would have Apex listed on the transcripts, but it would not say independent study.
Okay. With regard to independent study students wanting to continue to be part of our high school full high school experience as much as possible. What is the opportunity of independent study students to engage in social activities, from everything from football games and other types of social activities, on campus clubs, down to noontime pep rallies? What are the limitations or the exclusions with regard to independent study students to be able to participate in that?
As the law currently states, we cannot preclude a student who is participating in independent study from going onto campus to participate in any type of extracurricular activity or event on the campus of their home school. So that is allowable.
So hypothetically, if a family or a student may not feel comfortable being in a classroom on campus for all of their classes, but would maybe feel more comfortable being in an outside activity on campus, they could do that.
They can,
Okay, and we're
as
gonna,
long as they continue to feel safe, because the whole intention of the law is to make sure that students have an opportunity for an alternative program where their health would not be put at risk by being in person. So that needs to be taken into consideration.
I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
One last question. Apex and independent study is not for every student. And we know that the independent student, the self-learner, that student can excel in an independent study program, but most of us don't do well in those situations. How does the school help with that hold harmless provision that we have to say a student tries independent study, is not as successful, then we say, okay, you can come back, but does it affect the GPA? How does it affect, you come back and you've already missed this chunk of work in class, so then now you're behind and you end up with a C or a D, which then affects your highly competitive schools, right, that you're competing. So how are we counseling families and students to understand that whole concept? Because many of the times when if the information isn't presented to the families and the students, there's this misunderstanding that, this is just something I have to do, but they don't see the whole picture of how it affects their transcripts. So how are we counseling and helping families to understand that may be a factor? That's a very important factor for many of our students.
Right, absolutely. One of the requirements of AB 30 is that a written learning agreement must be signed by the parent and the student and the educator, which would be the teacher of independent study, before schools can start. But because the legislation was rolled out so late in the game, mid-July, they are allowing for the 21-22 school year to have that learning agreement signed within 30 days from the first day of school. And that would require a meeting with the parent, the student, and the teacher. It could be done virtually or it could be done in person, most likely virtually. And at that point, that written learning agreement will outline all of the requirements of the program as well as the expectations. And language in board policy does state that when students are falling behind, when they miss 3 or more, a minimum of 3 days, or they do not submit work by the end of the week, they have 1 week to complete their work, then the teacher will reach out to the parents and have that conversation. Supports will also be put in place during independent study to support the child if the child is struggling. But once the student misses 3 or more days, or they're not submitting work when it's assigned, a week later it's not submitted, the teacher will be reaching out to have that conversation with the family, with the parents, to understand what's going on. And if it continues, maybe have that discussion as this child is not thriving in this environment. Because you're right, some students thrive with distance learning or independent study. They thrive working independently. It's not for every student. But the language in the board policy does state that those conversations have to happen and supports need to be put in place when we see that students are struggling, because we don't want them to continue throughout the semester or trimester And then at the end, or even halfway in, when they decide to go back into in-person learning, it truly is a struggle for them academically.
So related to the board president asking and a comment, I wish those 72 students commit, they understand what is the independent study, because I worry about some may think because of COVID-19 haven't finished, pandemic hasn't finished, so they choose this as an alternative learning opportunity. Because Sunday morning there's a parent, they keep asking me, they try to persuade school district continue to provide the digital learning. So I worry about if they think we don't provide this, and then they choose independent study.
Right.
So we really need to remind those already coming for independent study understand the program and also the future result. Yeah.
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 And that why it was really important for us to put sample schedules on our FAQs on our district website so parents can understand. And when parents do call in or email me, I do reiterate that and let them know that it truly is an independent study. It does not mirror the distance learning we had last year.
Still have a couple more questions. I have a question that was in the independent study. It said 5 consecutive days, but it was stricken to change to 3 consecutive days.
Correct.
I'm looking at like the sample policies, and I'm looking at, for example, the high school one. So that doesn't necessarily mean 3 consecutive days of synchronous live or anything. It just means that they participate in at least 3 days of consecutive in terms of an independent study program,
Correct.
not necessarily the individual course. So I'm thinking, for example, Apex may meet, Tuesday, Thursday or something. So it applies to the program, not the course itself.
Correct.
Okay. And then, so one part, I do have a question back to this being the CSBA recommended policy that was born out of a desire to accommodate and meet the demands of AB 130. Did the CSBA policy and the AB 130, did it also include the language regarding the course-based independent study, or was that our district's attempt to sort of merge these 2 independent study programs together?
The course-based independent study language came from CSBA, from Gamut, and that was included in the new language from board policy. So we included it in here. We don't currently offer course-based independent study, but we kept it in here because it did come from Gamut and CSBA.
Okay, so I think that's where I was a little bit confused reading this, because I think that was my confusion, is we don't actually have a course.
We do not.
Independent study.
And that's termed optional language,
Okay.
so that if your school district does have that program, that it would reflect. However, we don't, and so we just kept it in there, and I'm sorry that we confused you. We did not intend to do that, but we just kept the language intact. So it does not apply to our current program or a program that we've had in the past.
Because I feel that that does sort of speak a little bit to what Mr. Kalaki was talking about. And so I think at this point, we're starting to venture into a new territory. And I'm hesitant to open a can of worms, because that's what's in the CSBA language, if it is not something that we as a district have actually vetted to consider for ourselves, which leads to my second question. Can Dr. Delatorre, can you speak a
Yes.
little bit to the financial implications of the independent study program and
Well,
what
there-
we're looking at?
Yes, I absolutely will. There are some financial implications to independent study. We do need to ensure that we have teachers that we have hired to meet the needs of those participating in independent study. At the elementary, we need to maintain our current class size ratios. So for the primary, we have a 24:1 class size ratio. And for the upper grades, it would be 28:30. So we currently have 2 elementary teachers that will be overseeing the independent study for Carver and Valentine. If more students opt for independent study, we will likely have to hire a 3rd. So these are teachers that we did not initially intend to employ. So it's 2 extra teachers for us. And at the secondary, same situation, but we can go a little higher with the class sizes at the secondary. So we have 1 teacher currently who will be overseeing the independent study program for grades 6, right?
6 through 12.
6 through 12.
And the source of the funding is coming from the ADA allotment or from COVID funds or a combination?
COVID funds and a combination, I would say, but primarily COVID funds, because we do understand that this is a temporary situation and that we will likely not be continuing this program into the next year, but who knows? We need to be prepared for anything and everything. So for this year, we will be utilizing some of the COVID monies to fund those teaching positions.
Okay.
So that's what I mentioned. If this relate to COVID-19, and then this year there's a fund available, but then later, I don't think the state will continue to provide the COVID-19 funding. So then later, then when we do the budget, then we need to budget the extra. Yeah, the staffing,
Yeah.
the money, yeah.
Because it's maybe one-time money.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That is correct. Yeah. And we're keeping a close eye on that. We are budgeting very conservatively, and we are well aware of the fact that we need to have a staffing plan that is commensurate with the available funds to support our staffing in our budget.
Can I ask, is it potentially less expensive though? Because if you've got 30 high school students,
Mhm.
you would need potentially 6 high school teachers, not just for those 30. I understand they would each have 6 classes, but you could potentially have 6 different people teaching these 6 different subjects. Whereas here you're going to have 1 teacher teaching all 6 subjects of these 30 students.
Yes, prospectively, it may very well be if this kind of program were to continue to be offered. However, currently, we were staffing for in-person instruction. The intention was to fully reopen our schools, and there was no way for us to predict accurately with any degree of certainty the numbers of students that would participate in independent study. It could have been, 2 kids, let's say, in which case somebody could have picked up an extra period to oversee that program. So for the current year, we can't lay any teachers off for the existing school year. So we have to continue with the staffing plan that we have for 21-22. But if we were to have that program in 22-23, 23-24, then prospectively, we might be looking at decreasing staffing if we could accurately predict the numbers of students that would go into independent study programs, and we would survey them and that type of thing.
I'm sorry, just real quick. Okay, so it sounds like at the moment,
Yeah.
2 teachers in the elementary level and 1 teacher at the secondary level. And can I just ask how we handle substitute teacher situations? I mean, do we have a backup designated independent study teacher that can step in because it's an entirely different system, or how do we handle that?
Well, we do have a pool of substitute teachers. And as a matter of fact, we are hiring, one of our substitute teachers to be the independent study teacher. And again, we might end up with 3 at the elementary and 1 to 2 at the secondary. Just depends on how those numbers unfold. But for now, we have 2 at the elementary and 1 at the secondary. We will train our substitute teachers to be able to step in to that role if needed. We're hoping that that won't be needed because we're going to invest a lot of time and resources into those teachers that have taken this on. One of the teachers is a retired teacher who will be coming back as an independent study teacher on a consultant agreement. So that's a win-win for us because we have somebody who's acclimated to the school district who is familiar with the rigor that we need for these types of programs. So we're really happy about that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt. Are we paying for Apex?
We are in the third year of a 3-year agreement with Apex. So Apex is not a new program to the school district. It is one that we have offered in the past. And I believe we may find ourselves in a situation where we have to purchase additional licenses. However, we're not sure of that yet. Mr. Kurtenbach is looking into that as of this afternoon. So we're waiting to hear back from him.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Dr. Choi, I believe you're up.
Yes, thank you. Let me go ahead and share the presentation.
Okay, so we are done for the first
Yeah, do you need a motion?
agenda, the first
It's for tomorrow?
first reading,
Okay.
right?
First
Yes.
reading, and then, yes, we'll look at it again tomorrow.
And that's the reason we had to have a special meeting. Mr. Chang, I just wanted to inform the board that I have had some inquiries as to why we did not have these agenda items on our regularly scheduled meeting. And that is because in order for us to adopt a board policy prior to the start of school, which is required for us to qualify for apportionment, we had to have a board-approved board policy no later than the first day of school. So we had to have the meeting so we could do the first reading, and then we will ask the board for your consideration on approval tomorrow evening before the start of school.
Yeah, thank you for explanation. Yeah.
Well, and thank you for making the time. We appreciate it.
Sorry, I'm trying to sneak in a drink.
Ah.
All right, good evening, Board President Shelley Ryan, members of the board and executive team. It is my pleasure to provide an update on our district COVID protocols for the upcoming 21-22 school year. I will start the presentation with an update on the current COVID situation here in LA County, as well as discuss how that relates to our school community. Next, I will highlight a few of the safety measures to provide some assurance to our students, families, and employees to understand why SMUSD is one of the safest places to be and how we are ready for a full in-person reopening. Now, since the start of the pandemic, all of us have essentially been on a roller coaster ride where one moment things appear to return to normal and the very next day things are getting worse. I would like to present some data and facts about where we are in LA County and put into context what that means to the San Marino Unified community. To start off, this table illustrates what the testing positivity rate is in LA County. As you can see, the daily average percent of positive tests have increased steadily since May of 2021. And to no surprise, hospitalizations reflect test positivity as a lagging indicator. While this data clearly shows a surge, it is important to note that the surge is quite different from the surge we endured last winter. Public health officials are largely attributing this surge to the Delta variant and have shared that the majority of those individuals testing positive and ending up in the hospital are those that are not vaccinated. And while we do see a large number of cases, it is mostly due to the fact that overall COVID testing is increasing, especially in schools. Despite the increase in case numbers, one silver lining is that the test positivity rate has taken a turn and is declining. This suggests that the case positivity may have plateaued as more of the unvaccinated get vaccinated. Now, while the county data is helpful, it is very important to put things into perspective and understand what is happening in the San Marino USD community. This chart illustrates the case rate since the start of the pandemic from April 2020 to today. As you can see, the current case rate is relatively low at 0.1. In comparison to that, the last surge around January 2021, the San Marino USD community should be very proud of the fact of such a low case rate. I'd also like to point out that the relatively low case rate is directly related to the high vaccination rates in San Marino. This table summarizes the vaccination rates of those that are 65 plus years old, 16 plus or older, and those that are between the ages of 12 through 17. The 12 through 17 population is showing a 91% vaccination rate, which is very good. This positive indicator is attributable to the on-site vaccine clinics that we hosted in May and June, and the majority of those in this population are middle and high school students. This data affirms that the students that are eligible for the vaccine are getting vaccinated. Another important indicator is the vaccination rate of our employees. We are very proud to be one of the first districts to receive vaccines when educators became eligible. Since early July, we have been surveying our employees to self-attest their vaccination status. Currently, 96% of our employees who self-attested are fully vaccinated. Approximately 245 employees responded during the summer break. As we return, we expect more employees to complete the survey. Last week, LA County Department of Public Health hosted a town hall just for the reopening of schools. Dr. Ferrer and her team, along with the superintendents from LACO and the state superintendent, had a very clear message. Schools are safe for full in-person reopening. The health and education experts highlighted that LA County schools have demonstrated success in creating a safe place using multiple safety measures and protocols. The three most important things schools can do as we reopen this year are to wear masks indoors, continue to encourage staff and students to get vaccinated, and make COVID testing accessible. I encourage everyone to watch the town hall that is featured on our website. This now leads to part 2 of my presentation, and I want to emphasize the following. The San Marino Unified School District is ready for a safe, full in-person reopening. Last year, when we reopened for in-person instruction to approximately 50% of our students, no teachers or students were fully vaccinated at that time. Our schools trusted and followed LACDPH safety measures every day, and all staff and students remained safe. There were no exposures, no outbreaks, and no school closures. The science and data shows that schools are one of the safest places to be. As a parent of an elementary San Marino Unified student who has physically come to school in person and has been on campus at every opportunity last year, it is abundantly clear to me that students are very safe in school. Now, with my second child entering TK this year and with the updated county protocols, while both of my own 2 children are not eligible to be vaccinated, I want to assure all our families that our schools will continue to implement safety measures that work and will provide our children the experience of an in-person learning that is so essential for their development. I would like to now review and highlight the district's safety measures for the new year. When we reopened last year, the SMUSD COVID compliance team implemented a multitude of safety protocols and measures. Each measure can be viewed as a slice of Swiss cheese. For every measure, there are holes where the measure is not perfect. After nearly a year of working on these measures, we have learned that some layers are more effective in preventing transmission than others. Furthermore, the layers that we implement must also coexist with the operational requirements of running a school and support the academic and socio-emotional needs of students. The science and evidence offered by our health officials must continue to guide what we do. I would like to take the opportunity to highlight the required and recommended protocols that will help us ensure a safe reopening this year. The first 3 that I will discuss are required by the county. The remaining items are measures that we have refined and will continue to offer. So let's get started. Masking is one of the easiest ways to protect yourself and others. LA County is requiring everyone to wear a mask indoors regardless of vaccination status. SMUSD will comply fully by requiring everyone to mask indoors. SMUSD will also recommend outdoor masking whenever possible, especially when there is crowding or more densely populated spaces. No student or staff member will be discouraged from masking at any time. Masks may be removed when one is eating or drinking or alone in a closed space. In our experience, the students who returned to in-person school last year, and also those who returned to campus, such as through the Right at School program, our students, including some as young as 4 years old, have been very good with masking indoors and outdoors. The safety measure will be supported through continued education about proper masking. The mask must cover the nose and mouth. We even employed creative, sometimes cute strategies to help ensure our staff and students practice proper masking at all times. The next safety measure that I have already briefly discussed is to get vaccinated. Getting vaccinated is one of the more powerful ways to protect oneself and others. Many ask, can we mandate our employees to get vaccinated? Currently, there is no legislative mandate requiring school employees to get vaccinated. While a legislative mandate may help some schools increase their vaccination rates, our staff is doing its part with a 96% vaccination rate. A larger concern with vaccines is the fact that despite 91% of our 12 through 17-year-olds being fully vaccinated, a large population of our students under the age of 12 are not qualified to receive the vaccine at this time. Clinical trials for individuals as young as 6 months are underway, and eligibility for individuals under 12 will come. In the meantime, it is important to point out that multiple measures are still in place to protect our under 12-year-olds. These include masking, distancing, hand washing, and testing. We are fortunate to have partnerships with medical industry leaders such as Keck Medicine of USC and Albertsons, who have partnered with the district to provide vaccinations to our staff and students. These partners stand by us and will be ready to offer the vaccinations to our under 12-year-old students once they are eligible. And speaking of multiple safety measures, I want to now talk about a very important measure that we need the support of everyone. Testing is one of the most effective tools for screening for COVID and controlling transmission. When schools participate in regular routine COVID testing, transmission is highly controlled. This year, COVID PCR screen testing will be provided to all staff and students every week. This testing plan will effectively screen individuals who may be infected with COVID but are asymptomatic. Identifying these individuals is key to reducing transmission. We will need our parents' support to talk to their children and provide consent for testing. SMUSD is partnering with Omni Pathology in Pasadena to provide no-cost PCR testing, an online testing registration notification system, and staffing to administer the test for every student on campus. The online system is easy to use and will ask for contact information as well as medical insurance information. Parents and staff may receive a statement from their insurance, but will never see a bill. If students or staff are not insured, the lab will charge CARES or absorb the cost. Omni Pathology will also send licensed and trained testing personnel in coordination with our schools to determine a feasible schedule to perform nasal swabs of our students and staff. In addition to asymptomatic testing, our schools will also offer symptomatic rapid antigen testing for any staff or student who becomes sick during the day. These tests will provide a result within 15 minutes. Should anyone test positive, they will receive a confirmatory PCR test. I will be presenting additional information on COVID testing tomorrow night in our regularly scheduled board meeting to highlight our LEA testing plan. On top of testing, we will continue to perform contact tracing as required by LA County. With additional funding available from the state, we are working to hire additional staff to facilitate COVID testing and safety outreach. Again, we are very fortunate to have partnerships with community health organizations in the past year that have helped us gain a lot of experience in the areas of testing. As you may recall, we provided COVID testing to staff and students participating in youth sports last year, when testing seemed like a pipe dream. With our established relationships and with support from our parents who understand the benefits and effectiveness of COVID testing, this safety measure is the most effective tool for screening. Next, I want to discuss symptoms screenings and temperature checks. When we reopened last year, staff and students completed an online form daily, asking them to self-check for symptoms such as cough, breathing difficulty, and fever. The form expanded to include questions about travel and close contact exposure. In addition, all staff and students were expected to perform a temperature check at entry. After a year of performing these safety measures, there is data and evidence that such screening forms and even temperature checks have many shortcomings. The county recognizes these shortcomings and does not require schools to perform them. In reviewing our own district COVID case data last year, not a single case was positively screened from our online form nor triggered by a temperature check. In fact, in many cases, our schools reported that the temperature thermometers were often faulty and staff often had to grab another scanner or rescan the student to get a normal read. This is not how an effective safety tool should work. After discussing these issues with our administrative teams, we determined that it was best to follow the county guidelines and not require an online form and temperature check, considering we expect full in-person instruction. However, as the COVID compliance officer, I must say we have received numerous concerns expressed about not providing them. After careful consideration, I want to emphasize that the symptom checker form is still available for all staff and students to complete online. The no-touch thermometers will still be available for staff and students to perform a temperature check. The most important requirement that we all must comply with is that if a staff member or student is sick, please do not come to school and please stay home. The online screening forms are available on the COVID compliance team website, and we will make them accessible on the school websites. We will also place our no-touch thermometers at the school entryway to perform a temperature check. I must reiterate that to help us effectively screen for COVID, please support our COVID testing programs. Next, I want to discuss physical distancing. When we reopened last year, the county required 6 feet of distancing. Eventually, it was modified to 3 feet. The county and the science recognizes that distancing is important, but due to the operational requirements of opening fully in person, the county recognizes that it would be impossible to fit all students into classrooms if everyone had to distance at a specific minimum distance of 3 or 6 feet. The county is not downplaying the effectiveness of distancing, but is essentially providing schools some flexibility to ensure students can participate in person. SMUSD staff and students will continue to physically distance as much as possible. Barriers may also be implemented similar to what was used last year, should crowding become an issue. A specific concern was expressed regarding crowding during lunchtime. In collaboration with our food services team and our school administrators, each school will implement strategies to allow for outdoor dining when possible. In fact, both elementary schools have outdoor eating facilities. In addition, both elementary schools will implement staggered eating times, and even when students eat together, they will not face each other directly, and they will eat with their stable group of classmates to reduce the potential for mixing or transmission. And finally, hand washing and the use of hand sanitizer will continue to be an important part of eating meals safely. The next safety measure I want to highlight is our ventilation and cleaning protocols. We installed medical grade H3 HEPA air filters in all classrooms. HVAC filters have also been upgraded district-wide. All doors and windows are encouraged to be open to improve ventilation. Learning activities that can take place outdoors will also be implemented. The increased cleaning and disinfecting frequency for our school facilities will continue this year. All classrooms will be disinfected daily and cleaned every 1 to 2 days, depending on the grade level. All restrooms will be disinfected daily and cleaned 3 times per day. I know I covered a lot, and I want to wrap up with a few important items that I've received a lot of inquiries about. First, many have asked what happens to a student or staff member that tests positive. We follow the county's exposure management plan for K-12 schools. In the event there is a positive case, the individual will be instructed to go home and begin isolation for 10 days. Anyone who's had close contact exposure with the positive case will quarantine. The county revised its quarantine period to such that it can be shortened to as little as 5 days with testing and symptoms monitoring. Last year, schools were directed to close should there be an outbreak of 3 or more cases with epidemiological links. Furthermore, the county stated that an entire district should close should 25% or more of its schools be closed. In the case of SMUSD, this meant that if one school was forced to close, the entire district would close. The revised exposure management plan no longer requires schools to close, but rather requires schools to consult with LACDPH on next steps. Dr. Ferrer stated that they do not see schools closing despite the surge in cases. It is important to also share with families that recent research shows that children infected with the Delta variant have reported sore throat, runny nose, and headache along with the regular COVID symptoms. With such a wide range of symptoms, it is very important for all students to participate in COVID testing for screening. Our faculty and students will continue to use the online platforms and devices that prove to be essential during distance learning. We recognize that these platforms continue to be beneficial regardless of distance or an in-person learning. And finally, we advise all parents to continue to talk to their children about any fears of COVID and to model good behavior, especially in the areas of masking, hand washing, distancing, and more. The district and our schools recognize that parents are our partners in educating our students. To conclude, I want to remind the board, our employees, staff, and students and families that we will continue to maintain and update the COVID compliance team website that is featured on every district and school webpage under COVID-19 safety. The COVID compliance team will continue to meet weekly, and I encourage anyone with questions to visit the compliance team website to review our safety plan and to submit any questions or provide input via the feedback form. Thank you. That concludes my report today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks. I do have a few questions. Do we know what the vaccination rate is of the students in the SMUSD population? Which is, my question is not San Marino City vaccination rate of 12 to 17-year-olds, but the 12 to 17-year-olds that are attending campus.
That's a great question. So we currently do not have that data. However, the systems are being updated such that we could track that information. For example, we use PowerSchool's SIS for our student information system. And just recently, their update has now included the vaccination status of students, as well as the vaccination type and the date that the vaccination was applied. So at this point, we are looking forward to welcoming back our students, and we are determining the protocols and the process for capturing that data so that we can update it in our systems.
Would it be helpful or useful to maybe do like a blind survey of some kind that we send out and ask? We're not asking for the names of students who are or are not vaccinated. We're just asking people to say yes or no or decline to state. Have we considered that just to get some sort of idea of what we're looking at as far as vaccination rates?
That certainly can be accomplished. We can certainly send out a blind survey. Some of the things to consider would be that the difference would be we would very much like our data to be solid data. If we could if we're able to track the data where we could identify the actual administration date as well as the administration type, that would be key. But if we needed quick data, we can certainly send out a blind survey.
Okay, appreciate that. We're talking about masking indoors. And I know that we received an email that had 83 parents of kids that may be well more than 83 parent or 83 kids that have concerns about masking and are asking for masking outdoors as well, at least for 12 and under, or at least for the elementary schools. It raises a couple of questions. First, what is a mask? What does our district consider to be a mask? Is a 3-ply medical grade mask? What is the minimum level? Is a bandana over half of somebody's face a mask? What do we consider to be a mask?
That's a great question. I would say that we comply with the county's guidelines on masking. And on the slide that I had shown on the screen, the county is very clear about what a mask is in terms of making sure that it's covering your mouth and your nose. So in terms of providing guidance to our families and as well as the students, we would refer them to the county protocols in terms of what is a proper mask.
In your presentation, you had early on, you had referenced what the case rate was, which was 0.1.
For the San Marino Unified Community.
Yeah, that I think it said as of July 1. Was that correct?
That was the most recent data. Yes, the county releases that data once a month.
Okay, so when in August does it release the number up to August 1?
So that data is again released once a month. Unfortunately, I don't have a specific timeline of when the county releases updated information on that. But the county does do a pretty good job of updating that, and I can certainly get that information.
Okay, yeah, I'd appreciate that, because I think I had seen, actually it was from our district, I think it was on our district website, the COVID-19 update from the Department of Public Health that stated that as of August 4, or at least that's when I think it was sent around, that there's been a 20-fold increase from 124 cases on June 21 to over 3,000 cases last week. And I think last Friday, I think it was reported about in excess of 4,200 LA County cases. So it kind of sounds like, particularly in the last month, there's been a significant increase, which is what was shown on the slides that you had shown. So trying to find out if we're really at 0.1 or if it's changed. I understand data changes daily.
Right.
But if we could find that out, that'd be very helpful, because I think those are numbers that are even, again, with kids not on campuses and what's happening. So what may happen.
Right, I agree. I think it's very important to study the data and to look at the data. I also am eager to see what the most recent data is from August.
Correct.
But in terms of LA County overall, we have seen a slight decrease in the test positivity rate. So that is a positive sign. In the larger LA County, they have mentioned the fact that the number of testing has increased significantly in schools. We're not the only ones implementing testing for everyone. And with the significant increase in testing, it is expected that you would have a significant increase in cases. And what's really important is that the positivity rate, which is those that test positive compared to the number of people that you actually test, has actually declined, which is a great sign. It's a positive indicator that that the infections and the transmission is decreasing.
In what time frame are you referring to that there's been that decrease?
So LA County reported the decrease last week, and just in today's update that was released, I believe it was about 2 hours ago, they also indicated that the test positivity rate has also decreased as well in LA County.
But within the last 3 days?
7 days, 7 days.
Okay,
We look at a 7-day positivity rate.
Because that COVID-19 update that I had seen shown that the test positivity rate had skyrocketed from 0.07% a little more than a month ago to 6.2% this week. That was the update that's on our website. So I'm just trying, I understand things go up and down, obviously.
Right.
But overall, over the last month, it hasn't gone down than where it was a month ago.
No, I would say at least in the last 2 weeks, it has declined, 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay, so yeah, so obviously, look, I know this has been a big part of your job and your life over the last year and a half, and you've done a great job, and we really do appreciate that. Even back from when I was on the schools reopening task force and we were first trying to deal with this, you were on top of a lot of data, and I do truly appreciate everything you've done
Thank you.
on trying to keep up on it. So obviously, I know it's an up-to-date thing that every day numbers change. One thing that stood out with what you were saying was kids are very good with masking. And that's the kids in our district. Our kids, from what we saw, were very good with masking indoors and outdoors, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that's great. Now, you had a slide that you had raised the question, can we mandate vaccinations, I think for employees, is that the slide?
Correct.
And you had said that it's not legislatively mandated.
Currently, right. There's no legislation in place. In fact, that was a question that was posed during the county town hall. Someone had asked the state superintendent, Tony Thurman, what's the chances of mandating all employees of public schools or to be fully vaccinated? And the response that he provided was that it requires a legislative mandate. And furthermore, Cal OSHA, which we follow from the state, doesn't require full vaccination. It's not very specific in that regard. But more interestingly, I think Mr. Tony Thurman also alluded to the fact that the state legislature is actually on break. And to even move forward to implement a mandate that would require school employees to fully vaccinate would take anywhere from, I believe it was 3 to 5 weeks, should the legislature come back.
So we have approximately 90%, 96% of our staff, according to the survey response.
Correct.
But you had indicated that was 245 people had responded. How many employees do we have?
So as of today, I believe we have 302 employees. 245 have responded to the survey. And the survey was sent out in early July during summer break. So even starting this week, we received at least 10 to 15 responses. So we're encouraging all of our employees to respond. It's actually a requirement for Cal OSHA for us to survey. But based on the data that we have, and it hasn't changed much in fact, between the second week of July and now, it's consistently floated between 95 and 97%.
Okay, so as the numbers come in, you're saying 95 to 97% of the responses have been, yes, I'm vaccinated.
Right.
But we still have approximately 60 out of 300. So
57, yeah.
Okay, so we still approximately have, I'm not known for my math skills, but 20% that have not responded?
Approximately 57 out of 300.
Roughly.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a deadline that those that have not responded must respond?
There is not a deadline. That is an ongoing survey because we expect that there will be individuals who may not be fully vaccinated and they're in the process of becoming fully vaccinated.
Are we capable or permitted to place a deadline on that survey so that we know by a certain date what the vaccination rate is of our employees?
We can certainly put a deadline, and I think we would have to also take a look at the frequency of we're asking employees to submit that data, but we can certainly explore that option.
Okay. And then the issue with the screening, I understand that you were pointing out there's some potential shortcomings with the screening, right? I thought of that similarly to your description of it as Swiss cheese. It's screening is another piece of Swiss cheese, and the shortcomings of that piece of Swiss cheese are there may be holes in that Swiss cheese, but again, there is a benefit of having that added layer of cheese. Correct?
Um, there's definitely an advantage to having additional Swiss cheese. But I would say that the county, I reached out to the county for this, why don't they require this? And it's a very practical reason. It's they shared with me that the schools are bringing everybody back in person, and to have staff check every single student that's coming in through the door on whether or not they've completed a form is overwhelming and may not be supportive of what we're trying to accomplish, which is to get students into in-person instruction. So I said, well, how are other districts accomplishing this? Someone as large as LA Unified who's asking having a health daily screening form. And the reality is they're having people complete the form, but no one is really checking to follow up on whether or not everybody's actually completing the form. So that is a reality check for us. And we discussed this with the administrative team. We have no problems sharing out a screening form, but we have to balance between what is practical, what is a useful tool for us. There's no downside to making the form available, and that's why I believe we've come to somewhat of a compromise where we want to make sure that the screening form itself is available. Should someone mention that they have COVID symptoms of those 3 symptoms and they respond yes, the form does tell the individual to not come on campus. So there is some benefit to that. However, when we looked at our data from last year, I conducted over 30 contact tracing interviews. We had a total of 17 cases last year in the district. And looking at the data and reviewing the logs for the screening tool, not a single entry was put in from any of those individuals. It didn't provide any direct evidence that the screening was working. So therefore, for that reason, we're complying with what the county is saying. The county is saying that it's optional and it's recommended. But in terms of looking at all the different measures and layers that we're putting in, it's not the most bang for our buck to put in the resources on a tool that's just not as effective, especially when testing is available.
Is there COVID funding available to hire personnel to assist with it?
So the COVID testing funds are really designed for staff to do testing and outreach. I understand that there are a tremendous number of openings for schools looking to hire COVID staff. And it's something that I can certainly check with the county, but in the testing plan that I'm presenting tomorrow, the descriptions are very specific that should we hire staff using those testing funds, it's really for testing, not for performing temperature checks or scans.
And it'd be one-time money for staffing that would not be funded the following year. Mr. Kalaki, I'm not trying to interrupt. I'm just making sure that the rest of the board gets some questions in. So are you almost done or do you have a few more?
I have a few more. I've got
Okay,
no
why
problem
don't you
with-
finish? Why don't you finish? Because I
Okay.
want to make sure that my colleagues also get in.
Sure. I've been approached by multiple parents that have concerns, particularly with their 11-year-olds that are going to be going to Wonder Valley or would hope to go to Wonder Valley. Wonder Valley obviously is pretty far away. They'd be on a bus for a significant period of time, and then they would also be at a facility that is outside of LA County. What will the protocols be for unvaccinated 11-year-olds with Wonder Valley? Is Wonder Valley going to follow protocols that we are setting forth, or LA County, or what are they doing there?
So I've had a brief discussion with Mr. Topalian at the middle school in regards to Wonder Valley and outdoor education. First and foremost, we would very much like to provide a COVID test for all of the students that are participating in the outdoor education, so that we can at least screen and provide a baseline of data on and understanding the students that potentially could be infected. And then secondly, we're going to have to work collaboratively with the outdoor education providers because, like you mentioned, they are in different counties, which may have different protocols. So we're trying to comply with all of the school protocols, but outdoor camps, organizations that provide those types of programs have a different set of protocols as well. So we do want to make sure that those protocols are shared with all of the families with students that are participating in those programs. However, in general, I must say that we have to actually look more closely at the operators of the programs because they're the ones that are actually looking and interpreting the protocols for their counties. So I think as soon as we obtain those COVID protocols, whether that may be in a handbook or a list, we will examine and scrutinize those very closely.
And do we plan, I mean, we're talking about weekly testing. Is it possible to require that if somebody is going to go on the outdoor education trips, that they take one of the rapid COVID tests before they get on the bus to go for the week?
Absolutely. The rapid COVID tests are here. They're provided by the state at no cost to the district. Rapid COVID tests are available. However, I would say that because we know the actual dates of when these students are going to these camps, I would suggest that they conduct the PCR test because it's just the gold standard for testing.
Okay, and we could require that that a student does not go on that trip unless they have been tested within a certain period of time before the trip.
So I do not know if we would require a student that is no matter what the program is, testing does require parental consent, especially for students that are under 16. So I would have to look into seeing whether or not we can mandate the testing. I would also suggest that we take a look at the policies from the providers because they may have a policy that does require testing. So we would have to look at that as well.
Right. Because I mean, obviously we want as many kids as possible to participate and safely participate in those programs and those trips, but they're not mandatory trips. Right. And so to make sure that everybody's on the trip is safe, that may be something that we could possibly explore, is that if you want to do this specific type of program, which is not mandatory, then you have a test within a certain period of time. Also, could we potentially consider contacting these facilities, Wonder Valley or Poly or wherever, to see if there are weeks that are open in the spring rather than the fall? Because if there's the potential of 11 and under students being able to actually get vaccinated, because a vaccination may open by the spring for that grade or those ages, or some of these 11-year-olds may actually just turn 12 by the spring, we may have the opportunity for more of our kids to be vaccinated. So it might be worth, taking a look to see if we can reserve a spot.
I agree. I think it's a very smart suggestion. We'd have to look at the contract and then also discuss with the providers.
Are we able to have hand sanitizers at the doors of every classroom, that you don't enter a classroom without sanitizing your hands?
So we have hand sanitizer everywhere. I mean, can we require students to? I'm not sure if we can require them to, but I know every opportunity is provided to students to hand wash and to hand sanitize, especially prior to eating. That would be a recommendation, I understand, but we would also have to take a look to see if we can require that.
Okay, and then we are going to keep the dashboard up and continue to update that as numbers change. Is that correct?
That is my goal. I know the county doesn't require that, but I believe for transparency reasons, we want to do our best because I know a lot of people have questions, and updating the dashboard would be a very powerful tool to communicate that.
Yeah, I think that you did a great job, or the district did a great job in communicating to the community so that we know what's going on in the schools. it gives the community knowledge, and knowledge is power, particularly when we're fighting something like this. So I think that'd be great if we can require that continue on. I mean, I guess we could talk, you let me know, Madam President, are we talking about, are we just posing questions right now, or are we also putting forward potential suggestions about how we'd like to maybe
We
see some
can, we
modifications?
can do it in a different way than the way that's going now. I just wanted to make sure I include my other board members so that they get some questions in. I'm positive Dr. Choi is taking notes and he will get back to you. And parents are encouraged to reach out to you, and we have our website full of information. So I want to just make sure that we get the last set of questions in.
Okay,
from
no,
the-
absolutely.
yeah.
Okay, so we'll
Okay.
go through everybody's questions and then we'll discuss whether we want to maybe consider some sort of potential modifications.
That might be at a different meeting. It's not, it's a information item. It doesn't require any action right now. I mean, you're talking about Wonder Valley, or what are you talking about? Hand sanitizer? Where there's,
Frankly, I'm talking about listening to the 83 parents that said that they would like to see masking at all times for the elementary schools. I think that is I think that's a prudent idea. And I think that that's important. There were other suggestions from the other speakers that I think are good as well.
Mhm. Okay, we can leave it until everyone's had their opportunity first.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Chang, any questions or statements? Ms. Chang?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Sure. So I did have a few questions. So first of all, thank you, Dr. Choi, because this is very comprehensive. And it's a forever moving target. So I know that some of the numbers are changing constantly. I think San Marino ourselves have seen maybe 10 cases, and it looked like it was happening in family pods, which makes sense. Like you go on vacation, you come back and 2-3 of you have it. But I think overall, we are still significantly lower than what we're seeing everywhere else, which is always, not would if there was some, we have been fortunate as a community to be able to enjoy. And I think I guess for me, the biggest thing is, before I get into the question, is that I think ultimately everyone's concerned, rightly so, and everyone's a little anxious. And I think that it's okay to acknowledge that and be worried about that. But I think we also know that we've done this before. I feel that a lot of the feelings we've had are similar to ones we had the first time we opened in March. And so I think, and we're in somewhat of a better place for vaccinations, at least for the adults. So that does bring me some comfort. On that note, though, there were some changes from what we're doing this time around than what we did last time around. And I think that's where maybe some of the anxiety lies. And so I appreciated very much that you kept talking about looking to LA Department of Public Health and how they changed their guidance, and how, we even saw CDC changing their guidance. And so I think when we talk about following the science, we're talking about following the science that keeps changing too, and the recommendations. And so if we continue to follow the recommendations, I think that helps put us at ease. I think the lack of ease comes from the fact that it's just different than what we had before. But I think that's attributed to the fact that we do have the vaccines. So my question, though, there are a few things that we were doing previously that I wanted some clarity on this time around. So regarding when somebody is exposed, or when there is potential, there was language in here about positive contacts and isolation. And I think that was what we used to call last spring contact tracing. And I noticed we're not really using that language this time around. So what would be the method in which, if there is a positive confirmed case, as defined by the rapid antigen or by the PCR, number one, and then number two, what it would be the procedure in which, how do you identify who would be considered a close contact? Is it 15 minutes with somebody with masks on, or is it if their masks were off? Is it outdoor? Is it indoor?
Right.
Is it, then what are the responsibilities and obligations in that circumstance then, because if you have to now quarantine or isolate, they're not even using quarantine anymore. If you have to isolate, then how is that going to end up looking? So I guess maybe I'm just asking if you can kind of walk us through that kind of scenario.
Sure. So in terms of contact tracing, we must still do contact tracing. The purpose of contact tracing is to really identify anyone who, identify potentially how the infected person got infected, and then two, to try to discover or find out whether or not that infected person has spread or transmitted the exposure to another individual. And most of the contact tracing is done through interviews. So you basically contact the person and you sort of take a look at when they first initiated symptoms and when they received the COVID test. And then you backtrack, you start creating a log or a diary, for example, and you identify where the person might have been infected in the first place. So there's very specific guidelines and windows of times when that happens. It's typically 2 days. Symptoms typically appear 2 days after initial infection, or if a specific date isn't identified, it's typically about 2 days before the test, your PCR test is confirmed. So in addition to trying to identify how the person got infected, we have to also backtrack and try to identify individuals that are within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes within a 24-hour period. And that's how you would determine your close contacts. So the county has very specific guidelines and processes on how to identify those individuals. Furthermore, the county also has very specific guidelines on how to communicate to those individuals. So when an individual is tested positive, there's a general notification that goes out to the school. But on top of that, if we've identified any close contact exposures, we would also have to notify those individuals of their close contact exposure. So individuals in the past that have had close contact exposure would be referred to go get testing, right? And then once vaccinations came into the picture, the county revised their guidelines and said that for those that are fully vaccinated, even if you've had close contact, you do not have to go get tested and you do not have to quarantine. So, and that makes a lot of sense, because if you are fully vaccinated and you've had close contact exposure, you are protected. You essentially don't need to go and get tested. They always advise that you monitor for symptoms. So in the event that there's a breakthrough infection, that you do go and get tested. So on top of the contact tracing, you had mentioned what's the difference between isolation and quarantines. So isolation is specific to the individual case. So someone who's been infected, you would have to isolate for a minimum of 10 days. And then after 10 days, if you are fever-free for 24 hours, you can go back to school or work, and you would monitor for an additional 4 days for isolation. Quarantine is for someone who's had close contact exposure. So quarantine could be family members that live with the infected case. It could be classmates that are within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes over a course of a 24-hour period. And the county has revised its protocols on quarantining. It used to be a minimum of 10 to 14 days, but with testing being available, they've modified it. And also with in-person coming back, they've modified it so that you can have a quarantine period as short as 5 days with testing. So you would have to take a PCR-based test to confirm that you are not positive. And after a negative test, you would monitor your symptoms through day 14.
So what, and I guess this is a question then for Dr. Richter, what capacity do we have for the students then who may have to quarantine or isolate if there is, if they are a positive or if they have been exposed and therefore must isolate or quarantine?
Capacity as far as like the location at the school site?
Well, no, I mean, I think I guess, I assume we're still doing isolation rooms, right?
Mhm.
So no more along the lines of if the student can't go to school, now what are they going to do?
We actually had that discussion this morning, talking about what that would look like. There are probably a variety of ways it could be addressed. One could be if they need to be isolated, it could be your traditional sense of like independent study where assignments are provided to that student by the classroom teacher, so that they can complete the work and stay caught up with their classwork and homework, rather than disrupt the classroom, the environment, the student, and put them into an independent study program. I think that would be more disruptive to the child, to the classroom, especially to the child's education, because they would be jumping into a curricular kind of point where it would not align to what they're doing in the classroom. Whereas if they were isolated and the classwork and the homework was assigned by the classroom teacher, as it would be if a student was absent, for example, for 2 or 3 days, then they would remain caught up and consistent with what they're learning in their own homeroom classroom.
And then another question I had was regarding the testing. So you talked about omnipathology. Do you know at this point what that looks like in terms of the logistics, and how are we dealing with the issue of consent?
Yeah, so I hope to present more on the LA test plan, because the things are moving quite quickly. We're at the process where we're actually reviewing the contract with Omnipathology, but we've had the luxury of working with Omnipathology since we've been doing youth sports testing. So it's not a completely new partner. We have an established relationship with them. And in my conversations with their executive director, they've shared that they are very amenable to working with the school district to identify windows of times to conduct the testing, because it is a logistical challenge. At the elementary levels at this point, we're looking at administering the test by having them send staff out. They are looking at sending anywhere from 6 to 9 licensed and trained professionals to administer the tests. So they would go by classrooms, and they would have the student actually come out right outside the classroom, and they'll perform the nasal swab for them. It is not a nasopharyngeal test, so it's not what the brain tickler. It's the one that just goes right in the postnasal area right here, and they take approximately 30 seconds to a minute to swab the student, and for an entire class, they're looking at anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes to complete that nasal swabbing. And they would do all of the the labeling, the identification, as well as the reporting for us. So that's a very attractive proposition from Omnipathology, knowing that we're short-staffed. We wouldn't be able to accomplish testing at this magnitude if it weren't for Omnipathology. And that's at the elementary levels. At the high school and middle schools, secondary schools, because your students are going into different classes, we would have a different model. We would take a look at organizing the students perhaps by last name, and we will identify opportunities and times when these students can go to either one or multiple locations, and they will have staff on premise to do the swabbing. And then once the results come in, a text message, email would notify the students and the parents if the parents decide to put the student information in there. And we would do this on a recurring weekly basis.
And this would just be something that would require consent to participate. And
So-
will it be required to participate and submit to testing?
So we cannot force or force a student and a parent to provide consent if they do not consent to testing.
And is this for both vaccinated and unvaccinated?
The testing is available to all.
Okay. Mr. Chang?
Okay, first of all, I'd like to appreciate Dr. Choi prepare this comprehensive report to share to the board member and also the public. I think this is a very good document. I remember the time before vaccination. I think the time really is a critical period for the entire community. But as the previous superintendent and also Dr. Choi and me, so we come out we know if we can do the vaccination, and then we can solve some of the problem. Definitely, right now my comment is my individual comment, so maybe it may offend to some of the public, but I need to speak honestly because of my background is public health and hospital management. And before I come to the United States, I working in the virology lab. So I face all kinds of the virus, but I'm still here. I never get affected because I know how to protect myself. And besides that, right now, I always get an update. My two sons in the two states, the biggest hospital and working, and one is a monitor for the federal data about the COVID-19. So I want to say is that our San Bernardino community or the San Bernardino Unified School District is a safe. I think always a comparison. We are more safe than the other school district. But don't forget, we are not in an isolated area. You know, every day, the student parent in and out, and the teacher staff in and out to our school district. So that's the problem, potential problem. So end up, we need to take this to understand how we can prevent our kids to get infected. If you look at the social media, and now the people recently, they post in Facebook, that's dangerous. You know, they take their young kid to the vacation. Even I'm not participating in Facebook, but indirectly, I see, you know, for this data, I think you are more than the 80% in this community for vaccination rate. I think it's okay. You know, the immunity is there. Look at the other countries, some they only do 10%, 20%, 30%. That's the reason they have the big problem. But as I repeat again, this is not an isolated environment, every day in and out. You know, the parents, they go out to work, they may bring the virus back to the home at the night. And the last couple of days of vacation, they went out, the whole family. Even right now, I know a lot of parents, they are scared about whether we will have a very heavy precautions measurement in the elementary school. I think that's necessary, but they also need to understand, not just focus on our school. Each family take a responsibility. You know, each family, they need to take a responsibility. See how they protect their young kid. Yeah, don't just bring the school, you know, and then after school, they take a kid to everywhere, right? 2 days ago, I take a Huntington Drive, go to USC, K-Medicine, and I see the El Sereno. They used to have a lot of homeless. So I think the county, they put a fence, so no more homeless there. Maybe they push them to this side. So that also is a factor. I don't say that I don't respect the homeless, but you know, homeless in the public health, you know, the people doesn't give them the idea, so they don't know how to protect themselves. And some, you know, the ethnic group, they don't want to take a vaccination. So they are always a comparison. I say comparison. They are more high risk population. So first of all, I think it's good, you know, each family, especially in the elementary school family, they really need to know and they also consistently protect the kid day and night, not just ask for the school, but we are the school. We also need to implement enough measurement and to protect the kid when they are in the school. I don't 100% agree the LA County Health because some is the political reason they have to do that. I'm definitely understand. I'm not trying to against the LA Health Department. I think they are okay, but not enough okay. So this movement, I'm asking my board member and the superintendent, you know, because of the age 12 plus, they already get the vaccination and significantly the percentage. So they still need to pay attention, but let's focus on the two elementary school until they get the vaccination. And for the vaccination, Dr. Choi, I already asked you a couple of times, you already got your connection or my connection. So we need to make every effort when the vaccine come out, immediately we want bring the provider, in-house and finish. So this is the first one. And before we get a vaccine for the kid, so this moment I'm asking the board member and the superintendent and your cabinet, there's spend more effort to monitor for the elementary school. I think that the two schools have to be consistent. If one school said masking indoor, outdoor, another one also indoor, outdoor. Otherwise, we're confused to the parent. Eventually, I think the two schools will fight each other. So we don't want to care about the face. I think the life and the safety is the most important. And if possible, we have enough manpower. Okay, we still like to provide the testing. Yeah, if possible. So I think the funding issue, we can find some resource. But I think maybe pretty soon, 2 more months, vaccine will come out. Once the student, young student get a shot, then we are changing the mentality. So that's my recommendation. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, board members. Dr. Choi, just fabulous in terms of what you've been able to accomplish in the last 6 months to a year and a half. And I am just so in awe of how far San Marino has come in terms of understanding the importance of the partnership. On the picture where it says the Swiss cheese model, I want to draw you back to that slide if you will. And along with social distancing, are you back there? Okay. So along with, when we're talking about layers, along with social distancing, and those are conversations you have with your children, as well as our teaching, our school community, our teachers are there talking to the kids about it. Proper wearing of the mask, explaining to the little ones, when you take off your mask, you shouldn't be taking it off in the bathroom, which is an enclosed area. You shouldn't be putting it down somewhere, swinging it around, doing it. And if it's dirty, they don't put it back on their face. So going over, packing extra spare masks for them, teaching them the proper, not turn on the water and just play with the water, but really washing their hands, scrubbing in between the fingers, all the way up to our wrists, using soap. I don't know how many times I see children coming out, and when they wipe their hands on their clothes, because I guess they forgot to dry, their clothes are dirty. So how can their hands be clean if when they wipe their hands on their clothes are dirty? So when we're looking at those things that we can all do, Mr. Chang asked this question almost every time we talk about this. What can we do as a community? Coming together around the vaccine, the testing, supporting one another, reminding each other of those protocols, washing our hands before we go into the classroom, sanitizing, washing our hands before we eat, and those things. Because you're right, you're absolutely right, Mr. Chang. We have the children a quarter of the time of the 24 hours. We have them for 6 hours. But the other piece, which is here on the picture, is really our school family and the individual families and how we help to educate and protect the kids. You guys have been along with us for a year and a half in terms of distance learning. Now we're looking at independent study and we're looking at this. But really, we have to balance what we're doing and not put so many barriers on where then it becomes not really an opportunity for us to re-engage our kids, because the learning, I mean, we have to balance everything. If we put so many barriers on, of course, there are higher returns, rates of return. But when we apply those layers, Mr. Kalaki has asked us to continue to look at the options. What's the data that tells us perhaps one of the other practices is more higher performance than the other? So we might want to look at that. Absolutely correct. We're hearing the families. We saw the petition. We're hearing families call in and come in, and those are comments that we want to respond to. So hopefully we can get a motion here to ask the cabinet to come back tomorrow. We have a meeting tomorrow, and maybe make a recommendation or two. Maybe look at something, maybe bring back some data, maybe have that conversation, because yes, today is not a regular session. So maybe we give another opportunity for people to call in or do whatever. And then Wednesday we open school. But we certainly can also have conversations with our principals at each of the site, because they know what they're doing. These are educators that have cared for our children year after year, and we have to respect their recommendations as well as looking at field trips and other things. But I think we can direct the cabinet, right? Would you like me to do it?
President Ryan,
Yeah.
if I may make a suggestion,
Uh-huh.
we do have a meeting tomorrow evening, and I think that a couple of the things that staff can look at and to research between now and then with our principals is uniformity in masking at the elementary schools, given that those children are not vaccinated. So we can look at masking indoors and outdoors. We can also look at universal self-screening that can take place in the morning prior to the start of school. But I would like the opportunity to be able to have the conversation with our principals schools to make sure that they support those measures. And we do have an item on the agenda tomorrow evening to talk about COVID testing.
Mhm.
So if it is okay with you, Madam President, and the rest of the board, we can bring that information back to the board
We come back
tomorrow
to that.
evening.
Mhm.
I think that that's great, and I appreciate you being willing to do that. I know we're right on the doorstep on the eve of the school year, but this is about as important an issue, I think, as we have in front of us at the very moment. I would ask that maybe you consider, in addition to what you're talking about with the elementary schools, the sixth graders, I believe, are also, for the most part, 11 years old and therefore not vaccinated. So do we also consider having the sixth grade or anybody who is under 12 within those protocols? One other thing I just, if I could just, one quick note with regard to what you were talking about, Dr. Choi, was also visitors. Now, visitors to all campuses, I would assume we could require that nobody comes on our campus without a test, correct? Because they would just as easily have the ability to do a Zoom meeting or something else. But if you want to come on to the campus, then maybe we could look at the potential that if you want to be a visitor to the campus, then you must take a test, or you must show proof of a test within a certain period of time or whatever. Because we want to be able to make sure that people that are coming into our campus that are not necessarily part of the high vaccinated rate of our staff or the high vaccinated rate of San Marino children, we don't know what their vaccination rate is. We don't know who they are. And so that's something we may want to consider as well when you're talking about that.
So I know the plan at San Marino High School is not to allow visitors on the campus at all. I do know that it's essential to allow parents to walk their children to school, especially the first couple of weeks at the elementary schools. Huntington Middle School, I need to have a conversation with Principal Topalian to find out what their plan is. But certainly we can bring that information back to the board tomorrow evening as well.
Great, thank you. And then one thing which I do believe is very important is, as I was thinking back of the questions and the comments I was making, my questions that I posed to you, Dr. Choi, about our staff being vaccinated. I do want to personally thank our staff for the efforts that they have done, the dedication that they have shown to the health and safety, not only of the other staff members, but to the children and to our whole school community. By asking what the survey results were, my intention was not to try to show that there's 20% of our staff that is not vaccinated. It was just trying to find out what exactly are we looking at as far as defining the data. But as you pointed out, it's consistently been at 95 to 97%. And that is extremely impressive. It's something that our staff should be very proud of. And so I want to personally thank all of them for that, because and for the efforts that were taken by the board and the district to help facilitate that immediately happening when the vaccinations became available. So I just wanted to thank all the staff for that.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you, Dr. Choi. Thank you, Mr. Chang.
I had one more question. I just remembered. It should be really quick. Have we restored all of our staffing at levels appropriate to maintain all of our cleaning schedule?
Not on our agenda, so just,
We can.
it's not on the agenda, that's all I'm saying.
Oh, I'm just wondering related to the COVID. Okay, let me rephrase. I might need Mike's help on here, the lawyer. How do I rephrase that question?
Probably
Does
can do it
the-
tomorrow.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I'll just leave that question out there and we'll explore it, answer tomorrow.
Okay,
Okay,
sounds good.
thank you.
All right. Okay,
Okay. Meeting's adjourned.
thank you.
Thank you very much.